revolution in Iran as we did in '79? Or will the government, which is a repressive government, quash any hope of political change? We turn to the author Martin Amis for some perspective and a better understanding of the role of the Basijis. They're a malicious force once revered for their sacrifices during the Iran-Iraq war. They're now involved in controlling, even repressing, the demonstrators. This is his take of the week.
We want freedom! We want freedom! We want freedom!
Perhaps the oldest civilization on Earth. It makes China look like a stripling. Its history is 2,500 years long, sliced right down the middle by Islam. Iran is a country so volatile that a protest about bus fares can leave 30 dead. But the eyes of the world are on Iran as they have not been ever before. Someone is restraining the Basijis. If those restraints are removed, then there will be a crackdown and the terror will work. There's no question that they have the monopoly of violence. They're all, in their hearts, veterans of the Iran-Iraq war, the nightmarish 8 years where hundreds of thousands of Basijis went to their deaths. And if you were in that war, you would have very different views about the value of life and the primacy of martyrdom and torment. You would be utterly hardened to doing whatever it takes to keep the present regime in power. Perhaps the regime is aware that demographics is about to whip the carpet out from underneath it, because Iran is an extremely youthful country. 70% of the population is under 30. These young people, particularly in the cities, worship America. Once they get out of school, the first thing you do is go and queue outside the American embassy to try and get out. Now, those numbers are going to increase. It's going to get a younger and younger society. And the mullahs, by definition, represent an obsolescent tradition that is not wanted. One can imagine a kind of a climb down, a power sharing deal, a weakened Ahmadinejad, but I don't think that they'll look at it pragmatically. In that sense. The Velvet Revolution is unimaginable in Iran. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 became an Islamic revolution because the mullahs had the monopoly of violence. Nothing has changed.
Martin Amis from his front room in London to our little front room here in Westminster. Welcome back to the programme.
Thank you.
If it's not a revolution taking place, what is happening?
Well, it looks, doesn't it, sometimes as though it's a provocation from the government. That imagine if they'd allowed a decent interval and then shyly admitted that Ahmadinejad had won by 51%.
Rather than the huge majority they've claimed.
Increased majority, and what, 8 million votes since the 2005 election added to Ahmadinejad on the basis of what? But 51%, you know, we could have probably swallowed. I mean, this is either amazing mismanagement on the part of the supreme leader or provocation as a pretext for a crackdown. as if they've seen that the pre-election fervour was in itself
dangerous.
Intolerable. Yeah, it seems.
Those who are demonstrating at the moment, are they out simply to reform the present system, or would they rather overthrow the present system?
Well, it's interesting that both sides of these street battles now being kind of kept apart by the police, not the Basiji being called off. Both sides are chanting, God is great. It's as if they're saying, we're not going to make this a wedge between us and the government and the people. That what we want is democracy. I mean, I think that's...
And that's not incompatible with Islam?
No. And
which is the position they're taking?
Yeah, well, Islam says it is, but they're saying it's not.
Yes.
But it's, I mean, when you think about it, Khatami, had 2 terms, 97 to 2005, and achieved very little. Now, the difference today is that Obama is in the White House. When Khatami got in, he was punished by Washington. Iran was punished by Washington. Now, I'm sure Obama...
He's not going to do that.
He's going to reward Iran. And that will shift the whole perception of what America is. And
Michael, are you clear in your mind whether Ahmadinejad won or not? I mean, did you think the election was rigged to a huge extent?
I would have thought that it was quite likely that Ahmadinejad did win. I mean, I'm listening to what commentators say, but the whole thing has reminded me of how modest we need to be in our in our own capability to assess foreign positions. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we've been trying to assess what's going to happen in our own politics, and we're quite inexpert on that. You can't predict what's going to happen even in your own politics. And here we are dealing with a situation, a society, a culture, of which we know very, very little. I mean, we suspect that something is happening on the streets, and that this is in some way being mirrored by things that are happening within the regime, that there's a debate within the regime about the way forward. And maybe within the regime there are some people who are more keen on supporting Ahmadinejad and other people who are keen on lessening his power, even dumping Ahmadinejad. But all of this is pretty much a speculation. You know, we don't really understand it very well.
Diane?
I think it's possible he did win. Not by this huge margin. You see, all the people demonstrating are sort of students and urban elites. And I remember all through the 90s, urban elites in London couldn't believe Mrs Thatcher kept winning because they didn't know anybody that had voted for her. And I think these people who've seen demonstrating... I'm not saying there's not a real insurgency, but he could just have won because all that anti-American stuff would be very popular.
But is it just...
With the poor and the rural.
The official line...
Could have won, but not by that margin.
Oh, no,
I
can
But
see
is it
that.
just... you see, the official line that they were giving out of Tehran was, oh, this is just northern Tehran. This is Islington and Swiss Cottage and Hampstead. But I'm getting reports that there's a lot of demonstrations and unrest taking place in cities all round Iran.
Indeed, and you know, there are glaring anomalies like Mousavi not winning his own province,
Which seems pretty unlikely.
Well, and also these other 2 candidates getting, you know, fewer votes than the membership of their parties.
So how widespread do you think the unrest, the dissatisfaction is?
We're all just guessing. I mean, I think it's important to understand that Iran is trapped in a contradiction. As I said earlier, you know, this ancient civilization, torn between its pre-Islamic past, Darius, Ashadir, Cyrus the Great.
With the sense of a great historic culture.
Well, and a luxurious, poetic, sensual culture. Iran is a great nation of poetry. Every Iranian knows his Ferdowsi, his Rumi, his Hafez.
So there's that on one side.
That sensuality. And to give an example of how deep that goes, guess who wrote this? It's quite a nice quatrain. I am a supplicant for a goblet of wine from the hand of a loved one. To whom can I confide the secret of mine? Where can I take this sorrow? The author of that is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He longs for women and wine.
First
It's a
time we've
secret
had poetry
and it's a
on the
sorrow, you know. And not bad, eh?
Yeah,
so there's this yearning for physical fulfillment, and now this new element where everyone's Americanized and
the young
wired
are,
up. And
the young are.
Totally.
Just quickly, I think one of the key figures in the campaign has been the opposition leader's wife, who's proved extremely popular with women.
But she had a
Holding
voice.
hands with
And she
her.
had a voice. And also, I do think Obama is a game changer in the region.
Well, I want to come back to
Changes
that
the
in a
game.
minute, but what I wanted to say to Michael is that whatever we might think, the fact is that Ahmadinejad can also get a lot of people out onto the streets, and that this is a regime which has the ability to be as repressive as it wants to be. I mean, it has, in effect, a Gestapo that it can bring out.
Well, I think the interesting thing that Martin said was, you know, why have the full forces of the mullahs not been put onto the streets yet? I mean, that implies that there is some sort of debate going on in the background. We must be very wary of our own yearning, because, you know, we yearn for Ahmadinejad to be
exactly. We look
defeated.
at things through a particular perspective.
We look through it through our particular perspective. And who knows how this thing will play out. I mean, it reminds me of the situation is almost opposite in terms of the country, but it reminds me of Tiananmen Square, an event that went on for many, many days. And, of course, we were all longing that it would end up with a democratic outcome. And in fact, in the end, the authorities decided the only thing to do was to go and gun the people down.
Martin, given that they have the ability and the means and the track record of doing so, why hasn't there been a more severe clampdown?
I think they're just waiting for it to dissipate.
They think it might just peter out.
Hoping that, having been so provocative, you know, with Ahmadinejad comparing the protesters to football hooligans, contemptuous, I mean, of the democratic process. They're now alarmed, and they're hoping it's going to, you know, just dissipate. But if they feel that the legitimacy of the revolution is threatened, they can't lose the revolution.
Then they will crack down.
They will crack down. And it'll work.
Diane, you mentioned the president earlier, President Obama. Explain to me how you think his presence in the White House makes a difference.
The different face to America, and he has appealed over the heads of politicians in the region, precisely to those young people who have been twittering and sending us their photographs on their camera phones. He's appealed directly to them.
So you think it is having an influence on the street?
I think in the long
Do you
run,
agree with that,
it's
Michael?
a game changer.
Well, I think
That's probably President Obama calling Martin Amis right now.
Well,
I think the influence. I just mentioned the comparison with China, and here's how it's kind of the opposite, because in Iran they're allowing elections. Of course, in China they don't allow elections. In China, however, they clamp down on the media. In Iran, they've allowed people to have mobile phones, to Twitter, to have blogs, to have all these things. And those are forces that are quite difficult to restrain.
Oh, they can be the new weapons of revolution.
You know, South Africa was doing pretty well as a repressive regime until they allowed television. And not long after television came in, the regime came down. So I do think that is a real weakness, that this regime has allowed people that amount of freedom of expression.
Let me ask you this final question, Martin. The response, the public response from President Obama and Prime Minister Brown, though not President Sarkozy, who's been more outspoken, but from Washington and London, has been quite muted. Tactically, I think it's been muted. They've decided to do that. Are they right, or should we be more outspoken in favour of the reformists?
well, it's rich to hear Ahmadinejad and others saying, you know, this impertinent. We haven't said, as he said of Israel, that Iran should be wiped off the map, you know, which is a violation of the UN Charter to threaten such a thing. But I think Obama's being, and we, you know, in as much as we can, should absolutely stand back.
So you think the muted approach is the right one?
Because then, if America weighs in, then the anti-America card becomes stronger within Iran.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Martin Amis, thanks for being with us tonight.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, don't stay where you are for the moment, because you need to hear this bit of script. Many people have been working on it. Because I don't think any of you think about heading off to bed just yet. Or